What I'm going to cover in this video is how to edit the i3 Open Innovation Dataset Index website using GitHub. And GitHub is what we're going to be able to use to edit collections, which are guides to different kinds of datasets, but also we can use it to edit notes and annotations about particular datasets. So for example, if we look for PatStat, if we go to this page, we can see that as well as the metadata that's also recorded on the Google Sheet, there's a lot of information that includes example code, descriptions, and links to external papers, which would be very difficult to store in the Google Sheet, but it's easy to store in a Markdown file, which is a kind of text-based file format that we use to structure the website. Similarly, collections actually don't have a sheet page associated with them at all, and are just a series of Markdown files that live in the Git repository and are then composed into the website themselves. And so if we look inside one of these, we'll see that there's a small amount of metadata available. This is not editable using the Google Sheet, but it is editable using GitHub. And then a lot more kind of long-form data in different formats. So in order to show you how to add information to this site through GitHub, I'm going to create a new collection. And this might be something that you would want to do. Perhaps you have a set of data sets that you or your research group works with, and what you would like to do is add them so other people can use them too. So if I go to the About page and I look for this link, so there's a link here to the GitHub repository, and this is actually linked also on the home page and in other places, and it's also linked on the Innovation Information Initiative website. But I'm just going to click the link here, and I'm going to open it in a new tab. And so what we can see here is the GitHub interface, and in order to make a contribution this way, you're going to need a GitHub account. But assuming I'm set up with a GitHub account, I'm going to continue. So I've opened the Open Innovation Dataset Index page. This belongs to a GitHub organization called Innovation Information Initiative, and this is where we index a bunch of different repositories that we use to keep track of different projects. If you're interested in contributing to any of these, please let us know. What we've got here is this repository called Open Innovation Dataset Index, and this is what's used to track the Google Sheet and compile the website that you can see on iiindex.org. What you might notice is that I've actually changed browsers. So I was in Firefox where I'm logged in with my main GitHub account, but importantly, my main GitHub account has direct write access to this repository. And in order to show you how you might make an edit to this repository without write access, I've actually switched to a second GitHub account that I've made for the purposes of debugging exactly this project. So much like any of you, unless you're one of the 3 people watching this who do have write access to the repository, the way that I'm going to make a change is actually to open something called a pull request. So I said earlier that I wanted to add a collection, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this folder that's called Collections. If I wanted to add a dataset, I would go to the folder called Datasets, and if I wanted to add a tool, I would go to the folder called Tools. It's worth saying at this point that if you're comfortable with Git and GitHub, it's perfectly fine to also do this process via the command line. But what I will say is because it's possible to do this via the Git interface, this can actually be a pretty streamlined way to edit these files. So I'm going to click on this collections folder, and what it's going to do is it's going to open this list of files that end in .md, which stands for Markdown. And it's very important to note that if you want your file to be accepted, it has to, 1, be in the correct format, and 2, it has to have the correct file extension. So this repository is only going to accept Markdown files, and that's because that's what it needs to build this site. So what we're going to do is, because we want to add a collection, we're going to go to the top right here to this menu, and we're going to click Create a New File. I'm going to click it, and Now it opens up this interface, and so it's going to say this to you and to me: you're making changes in a project you don't have write access to. Submitting a change will write it to a new branch in your fork. This is fine. So all this is telling you is, when you make a change to the files in this repository, you can't edit them directly. And instead what's going to happen is it's going to create a copy of these files in your Git account. After you've edited these files, GitHub will automatically open up an interface that asks if you want to make what's called a pull request. And this is what we're going to do to automatically merge the files that we've edited into the repository. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to make a test file. So I'm going to call this collection test collection, and importantly I'm going to put .md, so markdown file. And now I'm going to open up this file with some what's called YAML frontmatter. There's actually a template of this already in the repository. We can also just look at any of these files, and the way to get to actually see the same view as we're seeing, I'll just close that, same view as we're seeing here, is to go to the top right hand side and click raw, and so this is going to show you the plain code, and what you can see is a bunch of text in markdown format, and this is the YAML frontmatter. So I'm just gonna give it a title, I'm gonna give it a tag, I'm going to give it description, and I guess I'm going to give it authors. I don't want or need to add in a UUID. I can just leave that blank. And so I'm just going to make that just me. The description is, this is a test collection. I guess the tag here is testing. And the title is test collection. And then I'm just going to add in a little bit of text so you can see what that looks like. Here is some text. And if I wanted to see what this file would look like, I can click on this preview tab here, and you'll see that it renders the YAML frontmatter, that's this stuff up here. It actually renders it as a table, so you'll be able to see if you've got it correctly by seeing whether these things you expect to be in a table actually are. And then this text below is the kind of freeform contents of the file, and this can be as long or as short or as structured or as unstructured as you like. You can add code, you can add images, you can have links, bullet points, etc. The world is your oyster. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty happy with this collection now. I like the way it looks. And so what I'm going to go do is I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and this is true in either interface, right? Propose new file. And it's going to prompt me to make a commit message. This is just to describe the change that I've made. I think that create test collection is totally fine, so I'm going to leave that blank, and I don't need to add an extended description. So I'm going to click this green button, propose new file. And when I do that, it's going to open up another interface. And what it's doing is it's saying, locally, I've actually created a parallel universe of the repository that exists on the i3 index website, and what I've done is I've created a parallel universe where the file that I've made exists. And in order for these two universes to align, what I need to do is to create something called a pull request. And in this instance, what the pull request is going to do is one of the things that's nice about the i3 index repository is that we have made a bunch of automation. So for example, there is a process that's listening for new pull requests, and if the pull request has been made and it contains valid files, for example, files that are in markdown format with properly formatted YAML frontmatter, those files will automatically get pulled and merged into the repository. And so if I open this pull request, what's going to happen is the automated process is going to actually check to see whether this file was valid, and then say, that's great, I've created a new file on the website, and this is now in the repository. So when I click create pull request, it's just going to take me to this last step, which is asking me to talk a little bit more about the changes that I've made. This is fine. I don't need to give a huge amount of detail unless I've done anything special. So again, I'm just going to leave this blank, and then I'm going to click this final button, which also says create pull request. And this is going to load, and it's going to open up this interface. And what you'll see now is this big block starts to append to it. And like what's happening here is that a bunch of different checks are going on. And actually this first one here is what's called a GitHub action, and this is the action that's actually going to auto populate our repository. So if I go to actions, I can actually see this running live. You don't need to do this, but it's kind of cool, and we're going to have to wait for it to, it's already finished. You can see that these are all the different steps that it went through in order to merge our files, but we also don't need to go into that. So the nice thing about editing things via the Git versus via the Google Sheet is because you're making the request, the changes to the Git are pretty much instantaneous, because all that needs to happen is a bot says, hey, someone made a pull request, pulls that request in, and then the files are updated. And so if I go to index.org, and it's going to slowly load, we can actually see that our test collection is still loading. Test collection, there we go. And so this is just added in on the end. And if we go in here, we can see that it's got the authors and it's got the text that we added. And if we wanted to go back and edit this collection, the pencil and edit this page will both take us back to the exact same Git page that we added the collection in. So this is true of all of the collections as well. So if I went to the Google Patents one, if I click this pencil, it's actually going to take me straight to the same page on GitHub that I would need to edit. And so if you ever just want to edit a collection, that's probably an easier way to find it. Edits work in exactly the same way. You still need to propose a pull request, but just like adding a new file, they will automatically get merged. So if you have any trouble with this process at all, do reach out. It can be a bit complicated the first time, and I'm really, really happy to help. We really want people to be making these. We think they're really valuable for different people in the community. What I would say is please don't make loads of files called test collection. If you do, that's fine, but just tell me, because I do now need to go in and manually delete this. But that's fine. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.